have every honor that a man could have. You've got
Almost.
Oscars.
No.
No Oscar?
No Oscars. I got the Irving
Then why are
Thalberg
they giving
Award.
you this award then if you don't have an Oscar?
I don't have anything. I don't really have a lot of awards, to be very honest with you. I have the Irving Thalberg Award, and and I get a lot of little awards.
Yeah.
I've got 2 Emmys, but I've never had an Academy Award. I've been nominated, but I've never won. I'm too popular for that.
Too popular? Meaning what?
They don't give Academy Awards to popular films.
Are you proud of the fact that you make films that people want to go see?
Yeah. I believe
Popular's okay with you.
popular is okay with me. I think it's a very important part of society, and if you're making a work of art or a film or whatever and nobody sees it, I don't see where it does anybody any good.
I tell you who thinks it does do people good is Francis. I mean,
Yes,
Francis is making movies that satisfy one person.
that's right.
Him.
But I'm not sure with society at large it's helping much. And of course that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to make movies that only I want to see and I want to do. I've always wanted to do that. I fell into popular movies by accident. I always disliked Hollywood theatrical movies. I didn't want anything to do with them. So,
But you simply knew how to make them.
no, I mean, I guess it was embedded in my DNA. It's that particular thing, which is, I'm not sure whether it's a coincidence that some people like Steven and I grew up in the same environment.
Steven Spielberg.
Steven Spielberg. We liked the movies. Same thing with Marty. There's a whole generation right there that came of age in the 60s that grew up on movies. I didn't really grow up on movies, but it was a part of my life in terms of, it wasn't, I came up at the beginning of television, and the whole idea of visual storytelling and that sort of thing was at the right moment. I got in there, and what I wanted to do, and what a lot of the people wanted to do, was simply make films that people liked and enlighten them, entertain them. And that's what we were in the business for. We liked movies.
But the irony of this is that you are considered one of the most innovative filmmakers ever in the history of cinema.
But the innovation part is because I hate to say the word artist, but I will say the word artist. They, for thousands of years, were also the scientists, the engineers, and the artists. Because in order to accomplish certain works, especially in architecture, you had to figure out how to accomplish it, because they sat with the Duomo in Florence for hundreds of years because they couldn't figure out how to put the dome on it. And Brunelleschi, who did it, went and studied the Pantheon and other places where they had big domes, because they used to do it in Rome. But by the time they got the Renaissance, it was after the Dark Ages, and nobody knew how to do that stuff anymore. So he had to actually invent the ratcheting pulley in order to be able to get oxen to pull bricks up that high.
So that's what you have done. You have been able to create new things simply because no one had done it before, and you had to do it on your own.
Because I had a story to tell.
Yeah.
There is a gap between what is possible and where my vision is, and I've had to fill that gap, which is what anybody does. You don't invent technology and then figure out what to do with it. You come up with an artistic problem, and then you have to invent the technology in order to accomplish it. So it's the opposite of what most people think it is, and any artist will tell you that. And art, on all levels, is just technology, which is why it's, people say, well, monkeys can do paintings. Well, they can't really. They can do scribbling. They can do like what my 2-year-old does. But if you want to say, I want to convey an emotion to another human being, that's something only human beings can do. Animals can do it by roaring in your face or biting your hand off, and that usually has an effect. But to do it in a painting, to do it in a play or in a story, in poetry, or anything that's in the arts, you have to be a human being.
So we talked about artist, filmmaker, innovator, director, storyteller.
Well, a director is just somebody who's got a fetish with making the world to be the way he wants it to be. Sort of narcissistic.
That's you,
All directors, they're no different.
and you're a director.
All directors are they're vaguely like emperors, which is I want to build the society to reflect me and what I want. And the great thing about you don't have to kill a lot of people and build a lot of stuff and spend a lot of money if you're a king and want to do that. It's good for society, obviously. But a director can do it with a lot less money and just say, I'm going to create a world where people can fly.
So what does Star Wars and Indiana Jones say about the world you want to create?
Well, Star Wars and Indiana Jones were basically put together, especially Star Wars, more than Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones was just done for fun, to entertain people. And there were some messages in there about, archaeology and also about what we believe in terms of myths and that sort of thing. But the real one is Star Wars, and that was done in the same vein that what I was saying about the patron creates the propaganda, and what I wanted to do was go back to some of the older propaganda, which was consistent through all of the societies, which is mythology, but to say, what did they all believe? Because this propaganda was created independently.
Yeah.
And what are the things that they all actually believed? We're talking relationships with your father, relationships with your society, your history, relationships with the gods. All of this stuff is old, but they're psychological motifs that were created through storytelling, primarily oral storytelling, that explained what they believed in and who they believed in. So what I wanted to do is go back and find the psychological motifs that underlie that, because those grow out of a popularism, and to say that not all, but a majority of people, boys, have a certain psychological relationship with their fathers. And that's been going on through history, and trying to explain that to say, we know your darkest secret.
Yeah.
And therefore, you're part of us. Because we all know the same things. We know what you're thinking about your mother. We know what you think about your brother. We know what you think about your father. Really.
Yeah.
And those are the things that make people say, hey, this is why we believe this stuff. And again, the crudest part of that, in terms of the religious, spiritual thing, is some people have taken those ideas and then distorted them, and you end up in a cult where they're using the psychological tools to make you adhere to their society, and part of it is they have to keep it closed.
And to them.
But it's the same thing. I mean, and again, you go through history, and even though in most cases you had open societies, but they really weren't, because let's face it, you were going to get killed if you go outside the wall, so let's build a wall around the whole thing so we can defend ourselves. So they were self-fulfilling, isolated human events.
Because you have worn all these hats, though, filmmaker, director, storyteller, writer, technological innovator, what do you want the first line of your obituary to say?
I was a great dad. Or I tried.
But do you consider yourself any of those things first? Writer, storyteller, filmmaker, problem solver?
First is dad. I mean, I gave up directing in order to become a dad. For 15 years, directing. I just ran a company and was an innovator, but it was not doing what I really like to do, which is actually make movies.
Because you wanted to be a dad?
Because, it was one of those things where you don't expect it to happen. But once I was a dad, it was like a bolt of lightning struck me. And I ended up getting divorced around that time. And I just decided, well, I think I'm just going to take care of my daughter, because that seems like the right thing to do.
I made these, it was right after Return of the Jedi. I said I made all these movies, and I'm not going to escape Star Wars. And my central concern was my daughter, so I just said, I'm going to raise my daughter, and then I adopted another daughter, and then adopted another son, and it wasn't until like 15 years later that I actually said, okay, I'm going to go back now and direct movies again. So it was very much, and it's in the meantime, I had developed a lot of technology to do things that I could not do when I was doing Star Wars. Because in Star Wars, because it's a science fiction film, it's a fantasy film, it pushes the technological limits of the medium. Science fiction, fantasy, those sorts of things. You really, there's many things can't be done, they just can't. And there's an equation ultimately, which is how popular is something, how much does it cost? And they subtract one for the other and decide whether they're going to do it or not. So a lot of the films, when I was doing Star Wars, right after Star Wars, they didn't have room for spectacular. They only had room for, street movies. So, which is what I'd been doing before that. And so doing something that was sort of, an epic, a historical piece, science fiction, fantasy, any of those things, you just couldn't do it because they cost too much money. And technically, you couldn't accomplish it.
Kennedy Center honoree. That's a big deal. What does it mean to you?
Well, I could be glib.
No, just be real. I'm sitting here with a guy who's the happiest he's probably ever been. Married, 2-year-old daughter, all the money he'll ever need, sitting in this remarkable place where you live. So you got everything. But here is a saying that you are really one of America's finest artists. What does that mean to you that these people are going to honor you sitting next to the president at the Kennedy Center?
Well,
Don't be glib, be real.
well, I will be real. I'm not much into awards. It doesn't mean that much to me. Because I've gone through this, and I know it's just a group of people get together and say, we're going to give you this award. And a lot of them, it's just basically, you're there to draw eyeballs.
Okay, but there are awards and there are awards. And I've got to believe that this means something to you.
Well, it does mean something to me.
What is it?
I don't know. It's, again, I've got the Medal of Arts, I've got the Medal of Technology, I've got the...
So it's just another award. What
Smithson.
the hell? You just give him another award. He'll show up if you want him to, but he doesn't care.
Well, yeah, it's... I know it's about the TV show. It's not about me.
This is not a big TV show.